Yeah, so we're talking about Minus Man today. It's a 1999 film starring Owen Wilson and directed by Hampton Fancher. Yeah, just I just like to hear sort of your initial thoughts and impressions. I was quite confused by all of it, uh, by the motivations and why Ben is doing what he's doing. It was a very confusing movie to me. Um, I don't know. But what do you think, Dom? Do you want to kick it off?
Sure. I mean, I it's hard because I didn't hate this movie or love this movie. It was more like I had almost like a nostalgic reaction to like, oh, this is
Mm,
90s independent cinema. Um, which I appreciated because I was kind of like it was almost like a reminder of small independent 90s movies that you don't really see as much anymore. Like now it seems like independent cinema is even way smaller. Um, or, a movie that is almost essentially backed by a small studio that is being released as such. Like this felt like an actual small movie to me. So it's kind of reacting to a lot of I had never seen it before. So it's not like was like remembering watching it in the late 90s. Um I didn't have the confusion reaction that you did to the
mm,
beginning. I actually was thinking like um the casting was really well done because for me it was like Owen Wilson does all this and even though he was washing his pickup in the beginning, I didn't read that as me. I just wasn't thinking enough. I should have, but I wasn't didn't read that as like, oh, something he's done something in this truck and is washing it away. I thought it was more just like shot of a guy washing his truck. And then um he walks into that bar and he is very like unassuming. And I think that's exactly what you need, right? You need somebody that seems very non-threatening, very unassuming, and is kind of just like says like the right nice thing. He's trying not to get step on anybody's toes. When there's like a disagreement with Cheryl Crow and the bartender about money, he's kind of like, I have money. Like, let's just, everybody keep the peace. And then, she, goes in the car with him and she's, a drug addict or at least a drug user. And then we have this like interesting voiceover. And I've been thinking about voiceover narration a lot for my own stuff recently. And it's kind of like, I don't know, I'd be interested to see what you all think about the voiceover narration because, um, it's really the only way that we know what's actually happening. Um, he gives her this drink and she kind of slips away and we find out, spoiler alert, that he is a killer, probably a serial killer. It doesn't seem like the first time he's done this. And and then he starts talking about how like it just kind of happens and he doesn't want there to be a struggle or pain or anything. He just kind of almost follows what has to happen, right? So it's almost like this inevitable it's almost like death itself, right? He's like this inevitable force that is coming to these people. Um, but the interesting take on it of that, like not showing in any way really someone who takes what I would call pleasure in it. And it's not like he's like it's this urge that he's trying to restrain that he hates that he's killing people either. He's just kind of like it's just what he does. It's just a matter of fact thing. So I think that's a pretty interesting take on like murder slash again like death, right? Like it's not like death as this image of impending doom that wants to kill you. It's just death is coming for you, and it doesn't take any pleasure in it, but it's coming. Um,
yeah,
I
I
mean,
think that's
that said, he is a character and he is a human being. So a lot of like the tension that you feel throughout is kind of like the purposeful emptiness of that because you do want to connect to him as a person or a character and get his motivations, and you really don't get those at all, right? They're very much withheld in a purposeful way for the entire movie. Um,
yeah, I think that's a
what
really
about
good
you, Sue?
take. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Susie. Anything you want to add on to there or your initial sort of impressions?
Yeah, very much nostalgia hit all like the right feelings. Man, Janeane Garofalo, she's got some chops, you know what I mean? It's like I don't know. Anyway, and um I have like this hesitating sort of positivity about it. I think it's gonna be a difficult watch for most people. And I think I don't know why. I think it's because maybe people reading the description will want a certain thing from this and they're not going to get it. Absolutely not. But I think what is presented is interesting, specifically because of like the things that Dom was saying. It is so much, it is all in his head, and not that he's making it up in his head, but that we just see everything from his point of view. So yeah, it starts off in this like almost I have to stop doing this, but like anytime language kind of like pops off the screen or the page like that, I call it theatrical, even though I don't necessarily mean it. But it seems like that bartender was the reactions were odd because we didn't have any lead into them. Um, we don't even have a lead in into Owen Wilson's character, Van. We really just start off with that what looks like kind of a fine truck. So he does wash it, and that's fine too. I actually, even knowing that it's a movie about a serial killer, did not necessarily equate like he needs to like get human remains or whatever off this thing. I was just like, okay, interesting. And then very quickly he does slit Cheryl Crow that little flask, and she just kind of goes. And I felt totally fine with that. It like it because it was so successful in getting me into Owen Wilson's mind, I was not like kind of bothered. I was like, oh, well, this is a serial killer movie. This is his first kill, maybe.
Mhm.
And I guess I'll learn more about him as it goes on. It's so early in that and the intros are a little bit clipped and odd. So I'm just like willing to give it easily another 20 minutes just to see. And then yeah, you get to this and then I had to rewind because it was like they never mentioned the town or anything. Um he's asleep in the car or in his truck, discovered by somebody on patrol, the woman, the police officer. And then he's basically now fully into the movie with Brian Cox and Mercedes role and living in their house, as a boarder. And it's like all of these like facts of the movie are not necessarily they don't necessarily make any plot sense to me, but like in shorthand, I can see myself doing like, you know, gets discovered on the sleeping on the beach, has to find somewhere to live, ends up being a boarder at this home, and this is like almost how it seemed to me by the time like he's there, because the married couple is so interesting and kind of obviously working through their own stuff. It becomes like, I wonder if he's going to kill them, maybe not, probably not, and then it, it's not like a serial killer movie where we're trying to like get him caught in our minds, where it's like, yeah, he's gonna get caught now. No, it's not like that. It's more like, I really kind of want to know why you're doing this, but it's okay that I don't at the end because he himself doesn't, and we have been with him inside his skull this whole time. So it's like, it's not like anything has happened to create a revelation. There are two scenes that kind of like made all of this sort of okay for me, and it just really hung on them. And one of them was when he goes into that woman's house on Christmas morning and he sees that hit her art, and he's actually disturbed by it in a way that like I don't think he really like you don't really see him disturbed by a lot. And then it is actually that weird Janeane Garofalo kerfuffle he has after
At the
dinner.
ending, yeah.
Didn't understand that.
It was very weird.
And I mean, it's like, does he have feelings for her? Because that's the only way that we can understand, you know what I mean? So it's like, for me, I'm like, oh, maybe he's like trying to, in his own flawed way, reach out in some romantic way. You know what I mean? Just sense making. Our brains do that. I don't get any um I don't have any evidence for that. I'm just saying like because he does these weird things like with that hair. I mean, and then this was in that the trailer and everything. So in fact, I was actually primed. I was like, where is the hair? What is that hair about? You know? But like all of it was like, okay, so you do want to get caught, but not just not right now. And that's all I know. And that's okay for me. Because yeah, it's not like I feel like you set me up in the first third for one movie and then you presented something totally different. I don't think that's what happened. So I feel okay.
Mm,
Yeah, I agree. I think ultimately, like you say, it might be a tough watch for most people. I think it's a frustrating watch for people, but I think it's a purposeful frustration because to me, like you said, our brains are constantly what we're looking for is motive, essentially, right? Um, but the thing is,
I
I
think
could
serial
see
killers
as
have
like a
motive
writer,
though.
well, that's the thing. They do, and we think we want to know that. But I think as a writer, the concept of like withholding that is interesting only because ultimately, like, how many serial killer movies have we seen? It's almost always the same quote unquote motive, right? It's some exploration into how their childhood messed them up or how they were born wrong and they're just always, a sociopath. Like it's
Because
almost
that's
like
usually the case
wanting
though,
to
right? It's like,
well, but that's my point. It's like when we're watching a magician, we think we want to know how the trick is done, right? And then we find out how they do it and we're let down. So this movie kind of like leaves us with the frustration of not knowing how the trick is done. Um, but if they gave us the explanation, it also wouldn't be that satisfying because it would just be one of the things we already know.
mm,
But that said, like I did very much feel that frustration during it and was kind of like annoyed by it. I just think there's a difference between that being like an accidental frustration or a purposeful one. And I do think this is a purposeful one. But you're right, Soul. It's kind of like, but why? Like, but serial killers don't just do this, and they have they we like to think that they would take pleasure in the act of killing in some way, and we like to think that there's a reason why they do it. And so not getting any of that does lead to a second act that some people could describe as like slow, maybe even boring, because if you're spending so much time literally being inside the voiceover of this person who's essentially like a void, right? There is no deep meaning or connection that you can get to him, even though you are um, like I think it's adapted from a book, right? And sometimes with
yeah.
book characters, we get to really love them or know them because we can literally know their thoughts. And this is a movie with voiceover, so we get to know his thoughts too, but it doesn't actually get us that close to him because it's almost like he's so confused and he's so that he doesn't have explanations really for why he does this stuff. They're very vague. It's kind of like, oh, it just happens. I just go with like the path of least resistance and um that is ultimately unsatisfying to me.
It's a
Like
Buddhist serial killer, apparently. Like
kind
he
of,
doesn't
right?
seem
Like
like
it,
he doesn't seem like a feasible like a character though, you know what I mean? Like he doesn't seem like I don't know.
I mean the moment like that Susie brings up though where like where he does almost get violent with Janeane Garofalo.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
that
the
was very
fact that those moments
surprising.
are in there, it was very surprising, but it's there. And that did make me think like, okay, so there is some sort of like
Mm,
quote unquote murderer inside him here, or maybe he knows that if he does that, he's going to kill her and he doesn't want to kill her. But I think it very much leaves all of that up to interpretation of the audience. Um, it's a matter of threading that needle, right? Like how much is enough to give the audience to have and how much is not enough. And like that trailer that we've spoken about doesn't show any of the clips of the movie, right? But instead it purports like we're going to have a movie that you're going to talk about all night. And if anybody doesn't know what we're talking about, look it up. But the trailer basically was a couple going to this movie, the movie theater
let's
watching
watch it
this
together
movie.
actually, Dom. Why don't we
Okay,
because
sure.
yeah, it would be I think it would be fun. Do you guys hear it?
It was like the Heart of Darkness meets Gilligan's Island.
Come on, inside he loved these people. There's a part of him, I think, that cared.
Would you go to bed with him? He's the loner. The loner's the scary
The
guy.
loner with the sweet face, the loner who needs somebody to be friends with. I think it's a metaphor for his conscience.
That guy had a conscience? Right. But what I'm saying is that the tension...
You're just arguing with me, aren't you?
What was with this obsession with the football golden boy?
I knew he was trying to get rid of him, to save him. Well, think of how the title says -1, minus man. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. Everybody disappears before his eyes. What about the hair in the envelope?
Yeah, I think he did that because he was trying to get caught.
What about Sheryl Crow, the corn?
Wow, look at that.
Good morning, Janeane.
I mean, I thought it was a good trailer in that they tried something totally new. I think what's most interesting to me about this trailer is that it starts and ends with comedy, and
Mm,
there's very little comedy in this movie, right?
mm,
Like, it starts with, "Oh, it's like, what is it, meets Gilligan's Island?" Which is clearly like a joke, right? Like, it's not that's, like, not describing the movie at all, and it's kind of funny.
Heart of Darkness.
Heart of Darkness, right?
Heart
Heart
of
of
Darkness,
It's
yeah.
just like,
Which is a
neither I see, but
very
okay.
dark book, right? And Apocalypse Now, like, it's not it's a joke. No, you're right, like, they don't actually think that, and then it ends with,
Mm.
obviously, these 2 people dead floating because she's missed
I like the sound
her
effect. It
shift
just
as a
adds
lifeguard.
the bunk of heads. Oh boy.
It's funny though, right? And
Yeah.
so it's not at all the tone of the movie itself, but I think I could see how it would do the job of making people want to see it, even though it doesn't mention the movie really at all, and And it also tells us, right, like, that line at the end, like, "You be careful, you'll be able to talk about it for hours," I think tells us that, like, everything we've already talked about is very purposeful, that, like, they're not gonna give you the answers, they're just gonna give you a bunch of moments, and the whole point is to sort of frustrate you and have you, as the audience, sort of, like, talk about it and complete what you think was the motivations and what was happening, so, um, I think also 1999 I always have to do this for myself, but, like, 1999 being 25 years ago,
Mm,
it shows a little bit the difference of how people view movies now and view
I
movies
think you're
then,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Like in the 90s, it could be a movie night was a date night, right? You go to the movie theater, they show them talking, they show them eating after, but probably they ate before and they ate after if they were up all night, right? Like it's a movie is enough to be an experience to take you through your life almost to take up a lot of time. And now it's like a movie. Do people watch movies to converse about them? Do people even think about movies after the credits roll? Um, it's just like it would be audacious for any filmmaker now to make a trailer with the sort of uh to say like, "Oh, you're gonna be talking about this all night," because it's almost like we all have so much going on in our lives that it's just like, "Really? Like, you really think what you made" like, do people even shoot for that anymore? Like, do we maybe, but a lot of these movies are just like, "Hey, we're gonna try to get your attention for an hour and a half, and if we do that and you never think about it again, we're not gonna be surprised." Um, so it's an interesting thing to make a movie and be like, "We made a movie that you are gonna talk about for hours. This is gonna change your life almost, or be a big part of your life." Um, I don't know that the movie actually lives up to that, honestly.
Mm.
Um, like, we're gonna talk about it a lot on this call. I don't know if just, like, saw it with my wife that we would talk about it for, like, hours afterward. So maybe again, I think it's just our relationship with movies is so different now.
Mm.
Or at least my relationship with movies is different. My life has more things in it.
What was the reception on release? I know it's the scores aren't super high. They're not like totally low.
Mm,
At the time, maybe I wonder how people thought of it.
yeah, that's a good question. Um,
Yeah, 25 years is a long time
yeah,
ago.
just a
We
long
were
time
all
ago.
alive back
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
The conscious mind.
Well, I think it was nominated for the Grand Jury Prize at Sundance. It says, which I think that it must have got some attention and right. I imagine.
Yeah, that's a pretty big deal. I mean, it
Yeah.
has that feel to it, right? Like it just also feels older in a way to me, right? Because like, yeah, 1999 was 25 years ago, but like if you think of other movies that came out in the night, like 1999, with like isn't wasn't Fight Club and The Matrix both also
Oh wow,
1999?
what were they? That's crazy. Yeah, they were. I guess
So
they
like
were.
those feel like much more like modern movies to me. That this feels like it could have been made in the late 70s just as
Mm,
easily as it could have been made in the late 90s, and that's a little bit of function of the type of independent film it is. But like that's not even necessarily a bad thing, except for the cast, obviously, because at this point the cast does have a lot of recognizable people in it. Um, and I don't know. I just it's weird to me. Like it's weird to me in that trailer that they mention the football player. Like that one
yeah,
question,
that
and
was
then
yeah, I was gonna
that's the one they try to give you an answer to, which to me almost feels a little bit defensive. Because I saw this movie before I saw the trailer, and the one thing that I was kind of questioning was like, well, why did he kill that young boy, right? Like, yeah, I get they showed that like he wasn't feeling the whole football thing as much as everyone around him was necessarily, but that doesn't mean he was trapped in it. Like he had a whole life to live ahead of him, and he certainly didn't seem doomed, right? And so in the trailer, they tried to answer that, like, oh, I think she was saving him from a, but it's like, that's kind of bullshit to me. Like, that's the one thing, the one kill I call bullshit on, right?
but
And to
isn't the
me, the
first one
fact that
kind
they
of the
give an
same
answer,
though? I mean, just
no, the first one, and not that I agree with this, obviously, but the first one, you could make the argument like, well, if she's a junkie, she's pretty much killing herself anyway. And I'm just gonna, speed up the process and no one's gonna miss her. Like, that's like a moral judgment that I don't think he's making necessarily, but other people could, or at least you could imagine that an audience that you would start a movie like this with that type of kill because an audience could more easily accept it, right? Like no one is going to miss Cheryl Crow, and she is pretty much, you know, trying, she's poisoning herself anyway. He just poisons her faster. And doesn't cause any pain. It's kind of like the easiest, except for I guess if it were a man, you could imagine audiences taking it even easier than a woman. But like, um, it's kind of for me, it's like let's start the film with something that audiences won't immediately hate our main character. Um,
yeah, that's
and
tough.
then
Yeah, it doesn't
I
it
don't
doesn't
know, like
work.
the who else? I'm trying to even remember who else he kills, but like the football player to me, while I was watching it
Yeah,
immediately, I was like, wait, why is he going after this kid now? He's a
so
kid. Like
confusing. Yeah,
he doesn't, not that anyone deserves to be murdered, but the movie has not shown to us that he deserves to be murdered or that the universe is calling to him that this is the kid who needs to go next. Like I don't know, what did you all feel the same way about that or was it equal? Like how did you feel about
it
that?
made no sense. Like it's just not how like serial killers operate. It's not what it's just not what they think about. Like it doesn't make any sense. I guess that was my main sort of I just sort of fell out of it because of those the first two kills. It just yeah, because serial killers they're pretty singular in what they're thinking, what they want to do, right? Like it's not he doesn't make sense as a character to me. That's why I think that's why I was so confused by it. Um, I don't
Unless
know.
He
it's a
does.
movie about him coming to his own realization, but that is not this movie that we watched. No, but maybe like because of that, you're okay with a killer's own motivation, so long as there is one later. Is that
I think after hearing you guys talk about it, I think I understand what they're trying to do, with the film. But yeah, it just doesn't make sense to me.
my off the cuff sort of like within those first like pre what the movie getting started, so like in those 10 minutes or whatever and leading up to including the Cheryl Crow first murder, I felt same. I was like, okay, you're gonna have to pull this out somehow. I'm interested to see that. So and like that, and aside from this talk, having to watch the full thing to talk about it, but like, yeah, I did not understand it as a character. I don't know any serial killers and don't really like follow that as a culture like true crime stuff to know a lot about serial killer motivation. But yeah, in movie world, there is firm motivation. There's almost like a direct link to like style of murder and like whatever trauma that they went through. I mean, we don't know of any trauma yet, is like how it seems to be portrayed to me. But in order for that to be satisfying, I needed more. Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean,
So
you're
yeah,
not off base with that. I
it's a
felt
tough, I don't
same.
know. Yeah, it is a tough thing because yeah, I'm not some sort of expert either, but like yeah,
I'm
it's
not an
just
expert either, but I do think that usually there's an MO, right, which he does have, which is the flask. But there also is usually a similarity. For the most part, there's a similarity between the victims. Um, in this case, that's not true. I mean, the one thing I will say for it, and I think this is also very purposeful, is that we always hear, first of all, every serial killer that we know about is a serial killer, you know, well, not everyone, but most of the serial killers that we know about their motivations have been caught, right? And this is a movie about a serial killer before being caught.
Mm.
And so after the fact, you're always like, oh, well, he was so nice, or he was so unassuming, or the whole point is that he's so charming that he's able to get close to these people and that they would never suspect him. And so, like, this is the point. Like, we're watching that moment where he still is very unassuming and nobody knows to be scared of him. So it's kind of like answering the question for me of just like how did, any number of serial killers you want to think about, like how did they have, they're always talked about as like a lot of them like charming or like they have multiple families, and it's like how could that possibly be? So we're kind of seeing that part of it before they're caught. And then once they're caught, then we learn about the motivations and all the sickness and how they got to be who they be. But we don't have that yet. And I mean, we haven't talked at all about sort of in his head fantasies of these two detectives who are chasing him, right? And so it's almost like he is also thinking about himself as the serial killer in that pre being caught stage, but he's with the hair, he is thinking about being caught as an inevitability, but he's very much in the moment where he's not caught yet. Um, But I do agree with you that, like, that part where they're not caught yet is a moment of frustration and not really like, it's like if there's somebody killing someone out there and we don't know who it is, and we don't know why it is, and we don't know the type of person it might be next, we have literally nothing to go on, except we're inside this person's head and we still have nothing to go on. So it's sort of a weird, um, it's incongruent to have that level of access to a human being and still understand them so inadequately. But again, like he does understand himself so poorly as well. But then it becomes like, okay, well, is it interesting for me to spend this much time inside someone's head
yeah.
when they don't really know why they're doing what they're doing? That's a different question.
I thought Janeane Garofalo might be used in that capacity, but she never was. Like just to get another side of him because
Hmm.
we're so much in his head and not getting any information. Maybe like she could pull something out, but it never happened.
He doesn't change, right? I mean, I think that's part of
Maybe that was the
uh
ending. I don't know when he tries to like assault her.
well, he gets close to changing, I guess, or potentially change. He doesn't though, right? So like my point is like maybe what we're all feeling is like the dramatic need for a character arc, which is pretty much missing for this movie. So, like, answering the question of why did I watch this movie? What is the story of the movie, right? We know the plot of the movie. What's the story of the movie? I mean, what
It's
are we?
about a serial killer who what? Blows into town, kills some people. Did he kill Mercedes? Was he the one that like and stuffed her in what was that about?
I don't know. I thought that the her husband actually killed her.
Actually did it?
Yeah, that's what I
Which
thought.
again, that's also like a super weird coincidence. like, like,
Oh, so he actually did.
Yeah,
well,
that's what I
I don't
mean.
know. Like, that seems like the most likely explanation
Even
for the
having
movie.
that like as a question mark at the end is
Yeah.
like weird. Okay.
But like, yeah, because our brains are kind of like, wait, so this is a movie about a serial killer, someone dies, that means the serial killer killed them, right? But there isn't really stuff in evidence in the movie that happens. Like, we see the husband ask for his truck, and then but it again, there could be something where it's called all like, well, I know that he asked for my truck, so I can more easily frame him for this now. But that's not in the text of the movie either. I don't think the movie is interested in giving us those neat sort of like bows at all. Um, but then the question becomes, what is the movie interested in? And to me, the only definite answer is the movie wants us to ask a lot of questions
Yeah,
about
that's what I was. Yeah,
this person.
that makes a lot of sense. Um, hence the
What is
trailer,
it?
right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah, exactly. Well, think about it. If they did a traditional trailer, like, what would they show? There's very little action in this movie. Um, the character really doesn't arc. Um, there's
I
not
just
even that much conflict for a movie about a serial killer. There's more
yeah,
conflict between that guy and Mercedes Rule, Brian Cox and Mercedes Rule, than there is with the
yeah,
serial killer and any person in the movie.
I thought they were very quite good.
yeah. I
This
thought the
interesting
surrounding sort of
couple.
plot points, like the Doug and Mercedes, their relationship and how they're kind of taking Van in as almost like a surrogate, child to their missing daughter. I thought that was interesting. I thought Janeane Garofalo was interesting. Like she's so good in it.
Mm.
Like her
Yeah.
just how
Yeah.
lonely she is and how
And how nice and
yeah, sweet she
she's got those
is.
eyes that yeah, convey something. And I'm just
Yeah, it
like,
was very
don't
good.
pick him. That's all that's in my head.
Yeah.
It feels
Um,
like that the guy that gets the heart attack. I forget his name now. The
Oh,
postal
the
worker.
postal worker. Yeah.
He's just staring at him. I feel like, oh, he knows.
oh yeah, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
What do you
Um,
guys make of the voiceover bit where Owen Wilson says after or during killing the football player where he's like, I broke two of my own rules. Oh well, or whatever. Um, and it was like, don't kill anyone in the town you're in, or something like that. And then what was the second one? But then
Don't.
nothing essentially came of
don't kill
that
anyone you
either.
know. What was it?
Yeah, I think it's don't kill
Don't
anyone
kill
you
anyone
know,
you
and yeah,
know.
again, very
Um,
basic serial killer. Like, like,
yeah.
if you don't, you're doing things that could lead to you being caught. It's almost, it actually harkens a little bit back to, what was it, The Killer, where he's going there's that
Yes.
inner monologue and he's talking about the rules of like killing people. Like, it was a little bit that, but not really. I mean, it was very different, but he also breaks his own rules. Um, uh, yeah, I mean, maybe serial killers don't have the best impulse control and aren't the best at following rules, even if they're their own. Who knows? But like, it didn't have any consequence. To your point, right? Um, it causes a manhunt. He's a search for the boy. He's on that search. He also says at one point that he forgets that there's nothing to find and that he's looking as hard as anybody. But it's unclear if that's because he's trying really hard to play the part to fool everyone else, or if he's almost like mentally feeble in a way where he like has convinced himself that he should be looking to like there is a line where if the acting was a little bit different, we could get an interpretation where Owen Wilson is sort of like
A bit.
mentally diminished in some way, right? Like he has such a lack of understanding, both socially and of himself, that that could be an interpretation. But I think that would almost have been like less interesting because there's also plenty of serial killer movies about people who are, mentally diminished like that, and then that is almost like an easy way to write them off. And it's like that's the movie you're watching now. Is somebody who that's the story. Is the movie is somebody who's um you know, has that failing and then causes this. So I think a lot of the choices do make it more interesting and simultaneously more frustrating. Um, it's hard. It's hard to kind of not dislike a movie that is this frustrating. Because
Mm.
it's not that I hate this movie, like I said, but I do think it's extremely frustrating. And it's not the type of movie that I would be going out telling people like you got to see this movie. It's not a great character exploration. It's like a bunch of events with a lack of clear motive that your brain then has to try to make a pattern out of.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, I think that was a kind of the main point of the film, right? I mean, I think they do get that done because we are asking these questions.
yeah. Does he kill another person too? I'm trying to remember. Does he only kill the two people that
No,
we see?
he kills the guy in the diner.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Right, the
A
guy in the
diner
diner,
guy.
right. That's the other. I knew there was another
Completely
one. And I was
random,
like,
right? That was
okay.
like completely easy. Yeah.
Completely random, but then that shows that he's kind of smart or that he knows people well because he knows by looking at the guy that, the guy's getting his seat kicked by the kids, right?
Right.
And he knows like, oh, this guy's gonna get up. So he preemptively poisons the drink so he can switch it somehow knowing. Like that's almost like a superhuman level of um like he's such a good serial killer that he watches people enough where he knows exactly what this guy's gonna do, even though he's never seen him before. Which I thought was like a pretty impressive, almost like superhuman feat, right? Like, oh man, that guy's gonna get up because the kids are kicking his seat. Let me poison my drink now so I can switch it so that when he puts the container next to mine, it'll be easy, and then that guy's gonna die. And I'm not even. It's gonna happen, but I'm not even gonna get to see it. But that doesn't matter because I don't take pleasure in when they die anyway. It's just something that has to happen.
Mm.
Um, I think I've brought up this movie a few times, but a movie that I think is a better movie and that um, does give us sort of motives and also has a similar voiceover actually because it's sort of like a telling of story is Frailty. Have either of you ever seen
Oh,
Frailty?
I have not. No.
Matthew
I'll check it out
McConaughey,
though. I'll write it down.
Bill
Yeah,
Paxton. I
yeah,
love Frailty.
yeah. Frailty is a really
Oh my
good, I
God,
think,
it's really
underseen
good.
movie, but we
Mm.
understand, and there's murders in it, but we understand the motivations the entire time, and we don't know if the motivations are justified or not. And
Right.
that is really interesting.
Because Bill Paxton appears to be a caring guy and he's like
Right,
really devoted to his sons.
right. And his
Yeah,
sons are young, and you don't know if it's just because they were brought up with a certain ideology or if it's true,
yeah,
right? There's that all that interplay, and I think it's a great film. Um,
yeah, it's
and
really good. I actually totally forgot about that one.
yeah, and this is kind of like again, it's a different movie, so it's not really to compare one to the other, but the frustration that I was feeling watching The Minus Man just reminded me of like the satisfying version in Frailty.
Yeah.
Um, and who knows, this may have been a more successful movie in some ways in terms of like Sundance, etc. Than Frailty. Because again, I don't think Frailty was a very big movie. I don't know how well it was received, but I love it. And just again with the voiceover too, like you're getting inside this guy's head who's either committing or adjacent to murders, and it uses that to great effect. Here, I don't think the voiceover is used to great effect. It almost feels to me like if this was adapted from a book, that it's almost like a remnant of whatever narration is necessary in a book. Um, Although we'd have even less of an understanding in some ways of what the hell this guy was doing without the voiceover.
Mm.
Um, I don't know. It's to me more an experiment in frustrating an audience in a purposeful way than it is like a successful film or successful serial killer study or any of that.
Mm. That makes
That's
sense
when
to
we've
me.
also mentioned Mindhunter
Mm.
a bunch, right? Like especially when you have things like Mindhunter, where they're talking, that's what the 60s, 70s, where they're talking about like the development of serial killer profiling before they're even called serial killer. And it's all about the motivations and the study of them and the patterns. And so to have somebody who's just one person who doesn't really fall into those things, um, it's kind of like, okay, but so what? And then we haven't really talked about the ending yet. You have this like sort of Hollywood scare, I guess, where he sees the cop who originally found him on the beach, which is actually like one of the few moments of tension in this movie is the first when she finds him on the beach and we think like, oh shit, this cop rolled up on him. If she searches him, like who knows? Um, and so her car pulls up beside him and she's looking in and we think like, oh, she's gonna recognize him. This is the end. And then instead it's more just like a moment of like, hey, I know you. Like I recognize you from the beach. See ya. And then there's like a divergence in the road and they go their own separate ways. And he gets away ostensibly. Um, like, did that feel big? Did that feel inevitable? Did that feel earned? Like to me, it didn't really feel like much of anything.
Yeah, I didn't care
It
about
didn't
that.
feel like, oh, he got away because of course he gets away. And it didn't feel like, what? Like they could have got him or like any of the strong emotions that you would want to have. It's like, again, the filmmaker thinks of all of those and then just like they pull them back. Like, we're not giving you any of that. We're just being like, it's over because now it's over. And he's probably going to drive to the next town and he's probably going to do it again. And probably this wasn't the beginning of a story either. This was the middle, right? Like again, to me, it didn't feel like Sheryl Crow was the first time because you already had this like in the voiceover, this feeling of like it just happens. So we're kind of like it's in media res, right? Like he's killed before, he'll kill again, and we see the middle of this movie, which doesn't really get him any closer to getting caught, doesn't get him any better at killing people. Where what are we seeing? Maybe it potentially gets him closer to some human beings, and then his resistance to that makes him move on. But it also makes him, put that hair in that envelope and give it, so does it make him closer to wanting to be caught? It's just a lot of questions, and it is kind of like the middle of something. And so, um, and then like again, this is how I felt watching this movie. And then afterwards, I found that trailer existed, and there's a whole trailer that's all about how there's going to be so many questions when you watch this movie that you're going to be up all night. So it's like that to me, like I checked that box, like okay, this is purposeful. Like this was not an accident. This is not they left a bunch of stuff out, and it should have been. It's like they set out to start to have this movie where there's going to be a lot of conversation around it without giving you the answers and probably acknowledge that that's going to be frustrating, and they did it anyway. And I think that they were very successful in that. I just think you can set a goal and be successful at that goal without the goal necessarily being worthy in its own right. Right? Like
Yeah.
it's worthy to some people. To me, I'm questioning whether it was worthy, right? Like if I would never watch this movie again, which I probably won't, and I wouldn't really recommend it to most people, probably. Um, like, what is the good that I would take away from the experience of watching it?
Mm.
Maybe this conversation, maybe this conversation is enough,
Mm. Susie, what about you?
Yeah,
Is it something that you
yeah,
would?
just these I don't know, these choices, like the Brian Cox like beating himself
Mm.
thing. I'm like, oh, huh. That's a very interesting idiosyncratic behavior. I wouldn't mind spending time in that for like 15 minutes. I want to know more about that. Poor Brian Cox, like what's going on with it, having to do with the daughter certainly, but
Yeah,
like what? I don't
that was
know.
far more
And
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, it was just like these behaviors that are just unexpected, and then because of that get lends like this uncanny texture to the whole thing, which I thought like fed back into the movie itself. But I mean, at a certain point, I do know that like I'm reaching for these things. Like I'm like my mind is now looking for more of these, so that it's like, ah, yeah, that's exactly what the purpose of this entire framework was. Oh, okay. But I'm not sure that that's necessarily what's going on. Yeah, it's puzzling. I don't mind it though. I didn't.
Mm.
Because I'm always like interested in how little can we put on the page and have whomever, even if they're not into whatever I wrote, that they know what it is, you know?
But at the same time, like, this flies in the face of, like, not movie structure, but, like, any dramatic structure whatsoever, right? Like, that's what I'm struggling with, right? Like, the moment he goes to that woman on Christmas and then he leaves, he kills the guy in the diner. These are all scenes that could almost be out of order in the movie because there is no progression, right? It's just like these tableaus of this serial killer without one having anything to do with the other, without the order being important, without any type of dramatic tension or build. Um, and I think that is, um, again, purposeful. So not a failing, but a failing in terms of like dramatic structure. Like I don't think failing is not the right word because I think it's very much aware of dramatic structure and purposely, jettisoning that. But as an audience who watches a movie wanting it, dramatic structure doesn't come out of a vacuum, right? Dramatic structure comes out of our natural, innate human feeling for what a story is, a beginning, a middle, and end, and um, conflict and tension release and like all of those things that people talk about in writing are because that's what humans want, not because there's some random formula that someone created that we follow. And so to buck all of those conventions, um, you're going to get something out of that. And I think they do, but they also lose all of the things that we get from a more standard narrative that we're accustomed to.
Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that discussion. If you found it interesting, informative, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing. It'll really help us out. We have some really cool discussions lined up for you, so I hope you're looking forward to them, and I'll see you next time.